This is a Let's Talk Church Safety and Security microsode with your host, Paul Buckner. Hey, sheepdogs. So I want to talk about the fact that sometimes you're going to be considered the villain regardless of the outcome. Sometimes you may face ridicule regardless of the outcome. We need to be prepared to be wrong, but for the right reasons. So what am I talking about? So the other day I was talking to someone this morning that kind of sparked this. They called and they were telling me about a recent experience. They're in an office complex, but it's not a church, but the idea is pertinent. So a vehicle rapidly pulls into the parking lot and turns around. So we call that a clue. Why is the person doing this? And one of the office workers looks out and sees the vehicle come to a stop. Now, I don't know that they were doing 60 or 80 miles an hour, but probably in a parking lot where they should have been doing 15, they were probably doing 30 or 35. Enough to be outside of the norm and gain attention. A young man steps out of the vehicle and he's got a rifle. He is pointing the rifle at some kids that are younger than him there's a park next door to this office complex, and points the weapon at them, and the kids are eliciting fear responses to this. And so the office workers get a vantage point, they call 911, they get a multi-department response. I think they got state, they got county and other municipalities coming to their aid, because you could have a potential for an active shooter. A lot of times, when people pull up to commit those kinds of crimes, they are pulling in, sliding to a stop, jumping out. They're not parked perfectly in the lines. They're coloring outside the lines. They're opening their door. They're outside of the norm. It doesn't fit the pattern that you would normally see there. And so when they do something like this, watch for those red flags. So law enforcement arrives, they secure the young man, they secure the rifle, they step into the building and say, hey, condition is under control, we're investigating. And so as of that point, no one has come to harm. Okay, so people in the community began to ridicule the office workers. Some people were supportive, because it turned out that this young man had an airsoft rifle that looked exactly authentic to an actual rifle. And that is the thing that we have to think about in a situation like that. Is we need to be prepared to be wrong, but for the right reasons. And so I assured this gal that I would rather go as a police officer, I would rather respond 1,000 times to that than the real thing. Because there's a good chance in that situation, not only are you going to have to take the life of the shooter, is a very strong likelihood, or at least cause grievous bodily harm to them before they drop the weapon or whatever. Hopefully they surrender peaceably, but a lot of folks aren't going to in a situation like that. And so, there's a very short distance between suicidal and homicidal. They're very close together, and some people want to make other people hurt a whole lot on their way out. And so I would much rather respond to that. Now here's the thing. If you are attacking someone with an airsoft weapon, a paintball gun, anything that's dispensing painful projectiles, that they're not necessarily lethal, but you can be charged with assault. It's happened where somebody thought it was funny to drive up and pop, 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 pop on innocent bystanders, people who were not voluntarily involved in an airsoft match, in a paintball match. And this wasn't, and people want to, it was a kid with a toy gun. Not exactly. I'm not saying that the kid should face criminal charges. That's up to responding officers. It's not my jurisdiction. But probably a stern talking to, probably conversations with the parents. It's an immaturity thing on the part of, and I remember doing some immature things about that age, but the kid was old enough to drive. The kid was the size of a man. You're a couple hundred yards away. Maybe not a couple hundred yards away, but let's say in excess of 100 yards away. And you are looking at a situation like this. Now imagine a lot of people freeze in that moment, and they don't ever complete the OODA loop. And so they observe, they orient on it, they don't decide, therefore they don't act. And I told her I would much rather somebody decide, hey, this looks bad. I could be wrong, but this looks bad. I would much rather somebody do something like that than to not react. And then you've got to live with the fact that you made the wrong decision to not act. And I cannot tell you how many times that I'll be driving down the road. This has been this way most of my life. And there's a car accident that no one's called in. Everybody assumes someone else is going to do it. I don't know how many times I've called into dispatch and said, hey, I assume somebody called in this large piece of debris. There's a washer, like a clothing washer laying in the middle of the highway. Nope, you're the first. And people are like, going around it, and no one's calling it in. Everybody assumes someone else will make the call. And it's that way with car accidents and debris on the road. It's that way with verbal domestics in the restaurant, where it's getting out of hand and you can tell it a really good chance it's going to get violent. People underreact all day long, every day. You've got people that overreact, but you've got people that underreact. And I reassured this lady, I would much rather, in a situation like that, I would much rather take that call 1,000 times and it not be actually a call to lethal violence than the one time where you're going in, because these are children. It's an awful thing enough to deal with gunshot wounds. I've had to deal with gunshot wounds. It's awful enough when it's an adult, but when it's a little child, that's an entirely different conversation. And I pray that's something I never have to deal with. So, we have to be prepared to be the bad guy. So that's the first thought. I'm going to do another video that's actually going to be talking about the same incident from a different angle. Look for that to come out here in a few days. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. Remember, Semper Disciplina, that lifestyle of discipline training. God bless. If you enjoyed this microsode, check out the video and audio versions of the Let's Talk Church Safety and Security podcast.